Hey, what's going on? This is Jerry Fetta, owner, founder, and CEO of the Wealth Dynamics brand. Today is Thursday Thoughts. I'm going to give you my thoughts today on what would happen if the United States defaults on their debt. This is something that's coming up. People are talking about it in June possibly, and I want to talk about what would happen and also the likelihood of it, right? So we're going to dive into that today. I do want you to stick around to the end of the video. I have a sweet deal I'm gonna give you on arena tickets. Okay, the arena bootcamp is on June 3rd, so stick around for that. Otherwise, we're gonna jump right into our content today. All right, guys, Thursday thoughts. So there's a lot of news and talk about the United States defaulting on their debt. Now, I'm gonna give you this from my perspective, right? I'm not a politician. I'm not a macroeconomic person. I'm not a specialist in this area. I help families, individuals, and entrepreneurs build wealth. And so what I'm gonna share with you is, from an individual level, what should we be focused on right now? And what does this actually mean for us, right? Now, let's take a step back. What does it mean to default on debt? When someone defaults on debt, it's the equivalent of you having a credit card and not paying the bill, right? And then they send you to collection, or you having a car payment and not paying the payment, and they repo the car and take away. So default means I agreed to pay the debt and I didn't keep my agreement, to the point where I'm no longer operating by the covenant of the loan, the promise that I was going to pay, right? So what debt is this? The United States has different kinds of debt, right? So we have debt with the US Treasury, right? So the US Treasury borrows money from the Federal Reserve Bank. That's a form of debt, right? So that's going to be debt where the Fed collects money from the Treasury and interest payments on this debt. That's probably one of the more substantial debts we have. We've got debts with other countries, right? We have trade deficits that we run up where, we trade with them and then we don't pay for all the goods and stuff, and there's a deficit. It's like having a tab, right? And we tend to not pay that tab off very well. We run up big trade deficits. We borrow money from other countries, right? And so what this means is we owe money. Now, the biggest form of owing money for the United States government is going to be probably the US Treasury, right? The United States issues a Treasury bill, which is basically a loan. The United States says, we're going to borrow money, we're going to pay interest to whoever owns this bill, this Treasury bill. They're going to collect the interest. So if the US were to default, basically what that means is we would not be meeting our obligations. Okay. Now, let's say we defaulted on treasuries. That would basically mean that the full faith and credit of the United States government means nothing. Right? And that's a big deal, because that's the reason people like treasuries. That's the reason why countries like treasuries. That's the reason why banks like treasuries. So if we default and don't pay our treasuries, basically the pyramid scheme of the United States government and the illusion of all of our, stability and confidence in our system will crumble. Right? Banks will say, okay, this debt is no longer the best debt you can own. It's not the most secure thing on the planet. Some banks are already thinking this. Countries are going to say, we don't want treasuries anymore either. Let's start using other asset classes. There's some countries that already started doing that. But the one that really will get people, when I say people, I mean the government itself, is the people. If the individual, the American family, the individual in America decides we don't believe in the government anymore, the full faith and credit of the United States government means nothing behind the US Treasury. That doesn't have any meaning or weight behind it. If they default, they risk that happening, right? So what does that mean? That would mean that, from a global standpoint, banks in other countries would no longer want the US Treasury. Okay, that would weaken the dollar. Our dollar would become less valuable. And we would start to see the dollar buying less and less things. We would need more and more dollars to buy the same things we buy today, because it doesn't buy as much. It's not as valuable. It doesn't have as much strength in the global marketplace. Now, we're already kind of seeing this with inflation, right? And this is, just because we've been printing money and that money, basically dilutes the value of what we currently have with currencies in the United States. We take more currency to buy the same stuff, just like if we dilute Kool-Aid. We pour water into it, it's less potent. So you need more Kool-Aid to get the same Kool-Aid, because that's the glass isn't as full of powder, it's got more water diluting it. So that can happen with currency, right? Now, if that were to occur with a default, it would accelerate things. Okay, the dollar would become much weaker. People wouldn't want it, right? And we would have this thing where we have lots of money here in the United States, lots of money and very few goods. Okay, so anytime you have lots of money and very few goods, you're going to see inflation happen when there's more money than things. Okay, that means that prices on everything will drive up, because that money's got to go somewhere. we're not bringing in enough goods. That's going to start to turn into a weird kind of a deflationary transition as well, where if we're not bringing as many goods in, jobs start to wane, wages start to go down, people can't afford stuff, and the overall result would be the country, from an individual standpoint, drying up on the money supply. People would tighten up. They say, we don't want to spend, we're losing employment, we're losing jobs. Then we fall into deflation. So we probably would see inflation followed by deflation, right? Deflation is never good. Deflation, and it's probably something that does need to happen because it's a good correction, but it's never fun to experience. When you think deflation, I want you to think about the Great Depression, breadlines, high unemployment, people doing whatever they can just to get some cash and scrape up some money, okay? Now, will all this happen? No. It's not going to happen, not at least now, right? The time it will happen is not today, and the reason why is the government will simply just raise the deficit and keep overspending, right? They do this every couple of years, guys. Like, we fall into it, the drama, like all the politicians are like, oh, the debt ceiling and the budget, and what if we default, blah, 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 blah. Usually, what happens is they push that all the way up to the very end, and they use this to negotiate whatever little bill or rider they're trying to push in. And then they declare the budget, they raise the debt ceiling, everyone's fine again. Okay, it's going to be, we're going to default, there might be a government shutdown. It's always the same story every single time, right? It's just the theater of politics that surrounds it. The United States government is a broke individual that doesn't have an income, spends everything on a credit card, and pays the credit card by charging more on the credit card, and when the limit runs out, asks for a limit increase, right? So that's what happens. That's what's always happened. We run a budget deficit. We spend more than we bring in, and a government intrinsically doesn't produce anything. It gets its income through theft, by stealing from citizens, through taxation, right? So because it doesn't produce anything, it can't really increase its income without harming the population. Think about that. If my only source of revenue is taxes to gouge the productive individuals in society and penalize them for their production, and say, because you make money, you're going to have to pay the penalty. The ones that are broke, they're not going to pay the penalty. They don't produce anything. We can't get anything out of them. So we're going to take it from the ones that do all the hard work and bring the value to society, right? Well, what's going to happen? You're penalizing people being high value to society and producing. You're going to lessen the amount of people who do produce. The ones who do are going to move to states or even countries where they're treated right. Okay, it's not any different than being in a marriage. If you treat your spouse like crap, eventually they're going to leave and go somewhere where they're not treated like crap. And if someone kept doing that, they would run out of prospects for a spouse at some point because their reputation would be, this person treats their spouse like crap. So the United States does that to its individuals and citizens. If you're a high income earner, you're penalized with high taxes, right? And it's not like you benefit from those high taxes. That goes to pay subsidy programs and, overspending on government stuff and fraud and frivolous stuff inside the government. It's not like you're helping by paying taxes, right? So if the government wants more money, it's got to tax more individuals, but it's lessening the pool of individuals that want to go produce, and a lot of them are leaving, right? We're seeing increases in the amount of people that are renouncing U.S. citizenship, so that's happening as well. And so really it puts us in a position where the U.S. government doesn't have great control over its income. It spends more than it makes. It doesn't want to cut expenses down and say, let's fire these people, quit funding these programs. And if you've ever watched Parks and Recreation, reduce the government down to a single guy in a room, okay? That's probably what should happen, but that's not going to happen. And so instead, we spend, knowing we can just vote to increase the budget, vote to raise the debt ceiling, right? And we can use these things like default risk and, government shutdowns and all this different stuff to basically create fear and manipulate and force overspending and borrowing money we don't have. And we'll continue doing that. And the result of what we're doing now is going to be that the buying power of the dollar goes down, the repute of the U.S. Treasury goes down. And if we don't do this and we do default, the same thing's going to happen. The buying power of the U.S. dollar goes down. It's just going to happen faster. The repute of the U.S. Treasury is going to go down. It's just going to happen faster, right? So we have a fast way or a slow way to the exact same outcome. Okay, so what does that mean? It doesn't matter. It's the same story. Do you want the fast version or the slow version? Okay, if you're an individual watching this right now, whether the government defaults or not, isn't going to change the fact that you need to take care of your own economy. That's what the definition of this word means, at its root is actually the personal household. It's got nothing to do with the government and the president and Wall Street. It's what are you doing with your house, right? Think about it with like physical health. Like let's say that, there's a bunch of obese people in America, which there are, right? But let's say that we actually believed that their eating habits could impact our bodies. No, it doesn't work that way. So their financial habits can't impact our finances. At the end of the day, whether I'm earning in US dollars or I'm earning in euros or I'm earning in central bank coins or I'm earning in gold or I'm earning in pieces of corn, it doesn't matter. I need to earn. And earning has always been accomplished through exchange of value. Okay? If I earn, I need to save. Saving has always been accomplished by exchanging the currency for real stores of value. And then once I save, I need to invest. Investing has always been accomplished by investing in things that produce income, so it supplements my earned income so I can save more, so I can invest more, so I can earn more, so I can save more, so I can invest more. And it goes on and on and on and on and on, right? Now, here's the other paradigm shift I want to give you. When inflation happens, which we've been experiencing, it does mean there's more money out there, right? The money pool increased. So your income should increase too. If there's more money out there to get, there's more money out there for the taking, there's actually a shortage of people going out to get it. You could be one of those people going out to get it. And so if I'm watching this video right now and I've been watching, CNN or Fox or CNBC or whatever, news station or fear-mongering network I pay attention to, it doesn't matter. They all do the same thing with a different narrative. I should actually be focused on my production. I would turn off the news right now. I would pay zero attention to the deficit. I would pay zero attention to the default thing. I'd pay zero attention to the politicians. And instead, I would focus on how do I go increase my income right now? How do I go secure, stores of value and income producing assets? Because those things are going to help me regardless of what happens. So that's my message for you today. That's my thoughts on this matter.